The Hollowfangs Hunt. Kasha Winter had spent her life avoiding the woods at the edge of the village, the ones the elders whispered about when they thought she couldn't hear. But the night she stepped beyond the tree-line, the ground sighed. The trees shivered. And then she felt it something unseen, watching. A shadow moved at the forest's edge, and a man stepped forward, golden eyes gleaming in the dark. "You should not have come here alone," he murmured. "Now you don't leave alone." Chapter 1. The Sigh of the Earth. The crisp October air nipped at Kasha Winter's cheeks, carrying the scent of wood smoke and decaying leaves. At 58, she felt every one of her years, a dull ache in her bones that mirrored the deeper ache in her heart. 20 years. 20 years since Thomas, her husband, had been taken by the sea, leaving her with a grief that had settled into the marrow of her being, a constant companion. She pulled her worn woolen shawl tighter, the familiar weight a small comfort against the encroaching evening chill. Tonight, however, the usual melancholy was overlaid with a prickling unease. It had started subtly, a whisper at the edge of her hearing, a feeling of being watched. She dismissed it at first, blaming it on the unsettling stories the village elders told about Hollowfang Forest, the sprawling woodland that bordered their small, isolated community of Oakhaven. Stories of strange creatures, of disappearances, of a pact made generations ago to keep the village safe, a pact, they said, that demanded respect and a healthy dose of fear. Kasha had always considered them old wives' tales, the ramblings of superstitious minds clinging to the past. Thomas, with his pragmatic, seafaring soul, had scoffed at them. But tonight, with the wind sighing through the skeletal branches of the trees, the stories felt different. Real. She'd come to the edge of the forest seeking a rare herb, moon petal, said to bloom only under the light of the full moon, a remedy for the persistent cough that had plagued her neighbor, old Mrs. Abernathy. It was a fool's errand, probably, but Mrs. Abernathy had been kind to Kasha, a lifeline of companionship in the lonely years after Thomas's death. Kasha owed her this small act of desperation. The tree-line loomed, a jagged silhouette against the darkening sky. The last rays of the setting sun painted the clouds in hues of bruised purple and fiery orange, a breathtaking spectacle that did little to soothe Kasha's growing apprehension. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the worn leather pouch at her hip, where she kept her gardening tools. The air here felt different. Thicker, heavier, charged with an energy she couldn't name. Just a few steps, she murmured to herself, her voice a shaky whisper in the gathering gloom. Find the moon petal and then back home. But as she stepped beyond the last sentinel oak, crossing the invisible boundary between the village and the forest, the ground sighed. It was a low, almost imperceptible sound, a vibration that resonated deep within her chest. She stopped, her breath catching in her throat. The trees, their leaves long gone, seemed to lean in, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to her. They shivered, a rustling sound even though the wind had died down. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. Kasha was not a brave woman. She'd lived a life of quiet routine, of tending her small garden, of mending clothes, of avoiding anything that might disrupt the fragile peace she'd built around her grief. But now, that peace was shattered. She turned to flee, to return to the safety of the village, but it was too late. A shadow moved at the forest's edge, a deeper darkness within the growing gloom. It coalesced, resolving itself into the form of a man. He stepped forward, and the moonlight, filtering through the bare branches, illuminated his face. He was tall, powerfully built, with shoulders that strained against the fabric of his dark, worn coat. His hair was the color of raven's wings, streaked with silver at the temples, framing a face that was both rugged and strikingly handsome. But it was his eyes that held her captive. They were the color of amber, of molten gold, and they gleamed with an intensity that seemed to pierce through her, seeing straight into her soul. They were not the eyes of a man. Not entirely. Kasha's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs felt rooted to the spot, her voice lost in the sudden dryness of her throat. He moved with a grace that was both unsettling and mesmerizing, closing the distance between them in a few silent strides. He stopped a few feet away, his presence radiating a palpable heat, a sense of untamed power that made the air crackle around him. "You should not have come here alone," he murmured, his voice a low, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very ground she stood on. It was a voice that spoke of ancient forests, of moonlit nights, of something wild and untamed. Kasha finally found her voice, though it trembled with fear. I was just looking for," she trailed off, unable to articulate her reason, the image of the moon petal fading into insignificance in the face of this presence. He tilted his head slightly, his golden eyes studying her with an unnerving intensity. "Looking for what, little bird? Lost, are you?" The way he said little bird sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't a term of endearment, it was a statement of fact. She felt small, vulnerable, preyed upon. I need to go," she stammered, taking a step back. He smiled then, a slow, predatory curve of his lips that revealed a hint of teeth that seemed just a little too sharp, a little too canine. "Now you don't leave alone," he said, his voice softer now, almost a purr, but no less menacing. The words hung in the air, a promise and a threat, sealing her fate as surely as if he'd bound her with chains. The forest held its breath, the silence amplifying the pounding of her heart. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that her life had irrevocably changed. The sigh of the earth, the shivering trees, the golden eyes, it all pointed to one terrifying, undeniable truth. The stories were real, and she had just walked into the heart of them. Chapter 2. Whispers of Hollowfang. The man-creature, Kasha's mind corrected, a shiver of primal fear tracing its icy fingers down her spine, did not physically restrain her. He simply stood there, that unsettling half-smile playing on his lips, his golden eyes burning into hers, a silent command that held her captive more effectively than any rope or chain. He gestured with a nod of his head, deeper into the forest. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. Kasha's mind screamed at her to run, to scream, to do anything but obey. But her legs, heavy and unresponsive as if mired in thick mud, moved of their own accord, carrying her forward, deeper into the shadowed embrace of Hollowfang. The air grew colder, the scent of pine and damp earth intensifying, overlaid with a musky, animalistic odor that she couldn't quite place. It tickled at the back of her throat, both alluring and repulsive. The trees pressed closer, their branches intertwined overhead, blotting out the last vestiges of the moonlit sky. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the faint, ethereal glow emanating from the man walking beside her. Who are you?" Kasha finally managed to ask, her voice a shaky whisper that barely disturbed the stillness of the forest. He glanced at her, his golden eyes gleaming in the darkness. "You may call me Rorik." The name was unfamiliar, foreign to her ears, yet it resonated with a strange familiarity, like a forgotten melody from a long-ago dream. It suited him, she thought, a name as wild and untamed as the forest itself. "Rorik," she repeated, testing the sound of it on her tongue. What do you want?" He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent another shiver through her.
"Want?"
Such a simple word for such a complex desire, little bird.
"I want to keep you safe."
The words were unexpected, jarring against the backdrop of her fear. Safe? How could she possibly be safe with this being who radiated such palpable danger? Safe from what? She asked, her voice gaining a little strength, fueled by a surge of defiance. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. The faint glow that surrounded him illuminated his features, revealing the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the strong line of his jaw, the intensity of his gaze. He was undeniably beautiful, in a way that was both terrifying and captivating. "From those who would harm you," he said, his voice low and serious. "From those who hunt what they do not understand." Kasha frowned. "Hunt? I don't understand." Rorik sighed, a sound of weary resignation. "You will. In time. For now, trust me. I am bound to protect you." "Bound?" The word echoed in her mind, bringing with it a fresh wave of unease. She remembered the stories the elders whispered, the tales of a pact made with the creatures of Hollowfang, a pact that ensured the village's safety in exchange for something. Something that was never spoken aloud. The pact, she whispered, the words escaping her lips before she could stop them. You're one of them. Rorik's expression hardened, his golden eyes flashing with a flicker of something that looked like pain. We are what we are, he said, his voice tight. And you, Kasha Winter, are now under our protection. The implications of his words crashed down on her, a suffocating weight. She was trapped. Not physically, perhaps, but bound by something ancient and powerful, something she didn't understand. But why me? She asked, her voice laced with desperation. I'm nothing. Just an old woman. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from her cheek. She flinched, expecting a blow, but his touch, when it came, was surprisingly gentle. He brushed a stray strand of hair away from her face, his fingertips lingering against her skin, sending a jolt of unexpected warmth through her. You are more than you know, Kasha, he said, his voice soft, almost a caress. You carry the scent of the old blood, the echo of the first ones who made the pact. You are connected to this place, to us, in a way you cannot yet comprehend. His words were cryptic, confusing, but the look in his eyes, the warmth of his touch, sparked a flicker of something within her, something beyond fear. A strange sense of recognition, as if she'd known him, somehow, in another life, another time. He withdrew his hand, the warmth fading, leaving a lingering chill in its wake. Come, he said, turning away and resuming his walk deeper into the forest. We have much to discuss. Kasha hesitated for a moment, her mind still reeling, her heart a battlefield of fear and a strange, nascent curiosity. But she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she had no choice. She was bound to Hollowfang, to Rorik, by a pact she didn't understand, by a destiny she couldn't escape. She took a deep breath, the scent of pine and wolf filling her lungs, and followed him into the darkness, the whispers of Hollowfang swirling around her like a shroud. The village, her old life, felt 1,000,000 miles away. Chapter 3. The scent of pine and wolf. The forest path, barely discernible in the gloom, wound deeper into the heart of Hollowfang. Rorik moved with an effortless grace, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet of fallen leaves and pine needles. Kasha, her legs already aching from the unaccustomed exertion, struggled to keep up. She focused on the scent of him, that strange, compelling mixture of pine and wolf, a primal aroma that both repelled and intrigued her. It was a scent that spoke of wildness, of untamed power, of a world far removed from her quiet, predictable existence in Oakhaven. It was a scent that, she realized with a jolt of surprise, was beginning to feel familiar. The silence between them was thick with unspoken questions, with a tension that crackled like static electricity. Kasha wanted to ask him 1,000 things, about the pact, about his people, about the old blood he'd mentioned. But fear, and a strange sense of propriety, held her tongue. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing. A small, dilapidated cabin stood in the center, bathed in the soft, ethereal glow that seemed to emanate from Rorik himself. It was a humble structure, built of rough-hewn logs, with a single window and a door that hung crookedly on its hinges. Smoke curled lazily from a stone chimney, hinting at a fire burning within. Rorik gestured towards the cabin. This will be your sanctuary, for now. Sanctuary? Kasha looked at the cabin, her heart sinking. It was a far cry from her cozy cottage in Oakhaven, with its neat garden and familiar comforts. But she knew she couldn't complain. She was a prisoner, after all, albeit a prisoner with a strangely compelling captor. He pushed open the door, revealing a surprisingly warm and inviting interior. A fire crackled merrily in a large stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The room was sparsely furnished, with a simple wooden table and 2 chairs, a cot piled high with furs in one corner, and a few shelves laden with books and strange, unidentifiable objects. "It's not what I expected," Kasha admitted, her voice a little hesitant. Rourke smiled, a genuine smile this time, that softened his features and made him look almost human. "It is not a palace, I admit. But it is safe. And it is home." Home. The word echoed in the small space, a poignant reminder of everything she had left behind. Her home, her friends, her memories, all of it felt like a distant dream. He gestured towards the table.
"Seat."
"I will make tea." Kasha obeyed, sinking gratefully into one of the chairs. She watched as Rourke moved about the cabin, his movements fluid and efficient. He filled a kettle with water from a bucket in the corner and placed it on the fire, then retrieved 2 mugs and a small tin from a shelf. The silence returned, but it was less strained this time, almost comfortable. Kasha found herself studying him, taking in the details of his appearance, the way his dark hair curled at the nape of his neck, the strength in his hands as he measured out the tea leaves, the subtle shift in his posture when he thought she wasn't looking, as if he was constantly on alert, listening for something beyond her hearing. "What kind of tea is it?" she asked, breaking the silence. He glanced at her, his golden eyes twinkling. "A blend of my own making. Herbs from the forest. It will calm you." Kasha doubted anything could truly calm the turmoil within her, but she nodded gratefully. She needed something, anything, to anchor her to reality, to keep her from spiraling into panic. He poured the steaming tea into the mugs, the fragrant aroma filling the cabin. It smelled of earth and wildflowers, with a hint of something sharper, almost metallic. She took a tentative sip, surprised by the complex, soothing flavor. "It's good," she said, surprised. "It is more than good," Rourke corrected, seating himself opposite her. "It is a potion. A mild one, to ease your transition." Potion. The word sent a shiver of apprehension through her. Transition? To what? He met her gaze, his expression serious. "To your new life, Kasha. To the truth of who you are and what you are meant to be." She set down her mug, the tea suddenly tasting bitter. "I don't want a new life. I want to go home." He sighed, a sound of weary patience. "You cannot go home, Kasha. Not yet. Not until you understand everything." "Then explain it to me," she pleaded, her voice rising in frustration. "Tell me what's happening, what this pact is, why I'm here." Rourke leaned forward, his golden eyes holding hers captive. "The pact was made centuries ago, between your ancestors and mine. It was a bargain, struck to protect the village of Oakhaven from dangers you cannot imagine. In return for our protection, your people agreed to certain conditions." "What conditions?" Kasha asked, her voice barely a whisper. He hesitated, as if reluctant to speak the words. "They agreed to offer us a protector. Someone of the old blood, someone with a strong connection to the earth, to the magic that flows through this forest. Someone like you." Kasha stared at him, her mind struggling to comprehend his words. "A protector? She was supposed to be a protector? Of what? Of whom?" "But I'm not strong," she protested. "I'm just ordinary." Rourke shook his head. "You are not ordinary, Kasha. You are descended from a line of powerful women, women who understood the language of the earth, who could command the elements, who could shift." "Shift?" The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Kasha's heart began to pound again, a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She looked at Rourke, at his golden eyes, at the subtle, almost imperceptible hint of something else lurking beneath the surface of his human form. The scent of pine and wolf intensified, filling the cabin, overwhelming her senses. She realized, with a sudden, terrifying clarity, what he was, what they were. "Werewolves," she whispered, the word a choked gasp. Rourke nodded, his expression grave. "Yes, Kasha. We are werewolves. And you are one of us." The tea slipped from her grasp, shattering on the stone floor. The sound was lost, drowned, by another noise that sprang, unbidden, from her. A whimper. Chapter 4. A pact sealed in moonlight. The shattered fragments of the mug lay scattered on the floor, mirroring the shattered fragments of Kasha's reality. Werewolves. The word echoed in her mind, a monstrous label that clashed violently with the image of the man sitting across from her, the man who had made her tea, who had spoken of protection, who had called her little bird. Rorik didn't move, didn't flinch at her outburst. He simply watched her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. He knew the fear, the disbelief, the horror that was churning inside her. He'd seen it before, countless times, in the eyes of others who had discovered the truth about Hollowfang. I don't believe you, Kasha stammered, her voice trembling. It's not possible. I'm just an ordinary woman. You are not ordinary, Rorik repeated, his voice firm, unwavering. You are a descendant of the Winter Line, the first family to settle in Oakhaven, the family who made the pact with my ancestors. The blood of the shifters runs in your veins, Kasha. It may be dormant, suppressed, but it is there. He stood up and walked over to one of the shelves, retrieving a small, intricately carved wooden box. He opened it, revealing a silver ring nestled on a bed of faded velvet. The ring was simple, yet elegant, a single, unblemished moonstone set in a delicate silver band. This belonged to your great-grandmother, Alara Winter, Rorik said, holding out the box to her. She was a powerful shifter, a leader of her people. She wore this ring as a symbol of her connection to the moon, to the source of our power. Kasha stared at the ring, her heart pounding. She remembered seeing it before, in an old, dusty trunk in her attic, a relic of a past she'd never understood. She dismissed it as a trinket, a sentimental keepsake, never realizing its true significance. Put it on, Rorik urged, his voice gentle. Hesitantly, Kasha reached out and took the ring. It felt cool and smooth against her skin, strangely familiar. She slipped it onto her finger, and a jolt of energy surged through her, a tingling sensation that spread from her fingertips to the roots of her hair. The room seemed to shimmer, the air growing thick with a palpable energy. The fire in the hearth flared brighter, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Kasha gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. What's happening? She whispered. The ring is awakening your power, Rorik explained. It is connecting you to your heritage, to the magic that flows through your blood. He moved closer, his presence radiating a warmth that both comforted and frightened her. He reached out and gently took her hand, his fingers brushing against the silver ring. The pact, he said, his voice low and resonant, was made under the light of the full moon, generations ago. Your ancestors sought our protection from the creatures that roamed these lands, creatures even more dangerous than we are. In return, they offered us a connection to the human world, a bridge between our two species. They offered us you. Kasha felt a wave of dizziness, her head spinning. She was the price of a bargain made centuries ago, a sacrifice to appease the creatures of the night. She was a pawn in a game she didn't understand. But why now? She asked, her voice barely audible. Why, after all these years? Rorik's expression darkened. The pact is weakening. The old magic is fading. The creatures we once held at bay are growing bolder, their hunger stronger. We need you, Kasha. We need your power to renew the pact, to protect both our worlds. He tightened his grip on her hand, his golden eyes burning into hers. You are the key, Kasha. You are the only one who can save us. The weight of his words, the weight of the responsibility he was placing on her shoulders, was almost unbearable. She was an old woman, a widow, a gardener. She wasn't a warrior, a sorceress, a savior. I can't, she whispered, shaking her head. I'm not strong enough. Rorik cupped her face in his hands, his touch surprisingly gentle. You are stronger than you think, Kasha. You have the blood of your ancestors flowing through your veins, the power of the moon in your heart. You just need to embrace it. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin, his scent of pine and wolf filling her senses. Let me help you, he murmured. Let me show you who you truly are. His eyes held hers captive, a mesmerizing blend of gold and shadow. She felt herself drawn to him, to his power, to the promise of something more. Fear warred with a strange, nascent desire, a longing for something she couldn't name. He lowered his head, his lips brushing against hers, a tentative, fleeting touch that sent a shockwave of sensation through her entire body. It wasn't a kiss of passion, not yet, but a kiss of connection. A sealing of the pact, not in words, but in the mingling of their breaths, the merging of their souls. The moon, full and bright, shone through the single window of the cabin, bathing them in its silvery light. The pact was renewed, not in blood, but in moonlight, in the hesitant, trembling surrender of a woman who had just discovered she was something more than human. And in that moment, Kasha didn't just feel bound to Rorik. She felt a spark, a burning ember that was new. Chapter 5. Echoes of a Forgotten Life. The kiss, if it could even be called that, lingered in the air between them, a silent testament to the shift in their relationship, in Kasha's understanding of herself. It wasn't a declaration of love, not yet, but a bridge across the chasm of fear and uncertainty, a tentative step towards a future she couldn't yet comprehend. Rorik stepped back, breaking the spell, but the connection remained, a shimmering thread of energy that bound them together. He looked at her, his golden eyes searching, questioning. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice soft. "The power?" Kasha closed her eyes, focusing on the sensations coursing through her body, the tingling in her fingertips, the warmth spreading through her limbs, the heightened awareness of the world around her. She could hear the rustling of leaves in the wind, the hooting of an owl in the distance, the crackling of the fire in the hearth, all with a clarity she'd never experienced before. "Yes," she whispered, opening her eyes. I feel something." It wasn't a dramatic transformation, not a sudden burst of magical power. It was subtle, subtle as the first hint of dawn, but it was there. A seed had been planted, a spark ignited. Rorik nodded, a hint of relief in his expression.
"It will take time," he said.
"But you will learn to control it, to harness it. I will teach you." He gestured towards a stack of books on one of the shelves. "These belong to your ancestors. They contain knowledge of our ways, of the magic that flows through this forest, of the power that lies dormant within you." Kasha looked at the books, their leather covers worn and faded, their pages filled with strange symbols and unfamiliar words. She'd always loved to read, but these were different. They were a link to a past she'd never known, a past that was now, suddenly, her present. I don't know where to begin," she said, feeling overwhelmed. "We will begin with the basics," Rorik said, his voice reassuring. "With understanding your senses, your connection to the moon, your ability to shift." The word shift still sent a shiver of apprehension through her, but it was mixed with a growing sense of curiosity, of excitement. The idea of transforming, of becoming something more, was both terrifying and exhilarating. He spent the next few hours explaining the fundamentals of their existence, the lunar cycle and its influence on their powers, the heightened senses, the accelerated healing, the thirst. He spoke of the different pacts, their territories, their rivalries, their ancient laws. He spoke of the dangers they faced, the hunters who sought to destroy them, the other creatures that lurked in the shadows. Kasha listened, absorbing his words, her mind struggling to reconcile this new reality with the life she'd always known. It was like stepping into a different world, a world of magic and danger, of ancient secrets and forbidden desires. As the night wore on, exhaustion began to creep in, the adrenaline fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. Rorik noticed, his gaze softening. "You should rest," he said. "You have had a long day." He gestured towards the cot piled high with furs. It looked surprisingly inviting, a haven of warmth and comfort in this strange, unsettling place. Kasha hesitated. Where will you sleep?" He smiled, a wry twist of his lips. "I will keep watch. I am used to it." She knew he was referring to his wolf nature, to his ability to stay awake for long periods, to patrol his territory, to protect his pack, and now, to protect her. She lay down on the cot, sinking into the soft furs, their warmth enveloping her. The scent of pine and wolf, Rorik's scent, was strong here, a comforting presence that lulled her toward sleep. But even as her eyes closed, images flickered behind her eyelids. The silver ring on her finger, the golden eyes of the wolf man, the shattered fragments of her old life. She dreamed of running through the forest, the wind in her hair, the moonlight guiding her way. She dreamed of shifting, of transforming, of embracing the wildness within her. She woke with a start, the first rays of dawn filtering through the small window. The cabin was empty. Rorik was gone. For a moment, panic flared, the fear of abandonment, of being alone in this strange place, overwhelming her. But then she saw it, a small, handwritten note left on the table, beside a steaming mug of the herbal tea. Gone to hunt. Back soon.
Do not leave the cabin.
The simple words, written in a strong, elegant script, reassured her. He hadn't abandoned her. He was protecting her, even in his absence. She took a sip of the tea, its familiar flavor calming her nerves. She looked around the cabin, at the books, at the fire, at the furs. This was her reality now. This was her life. And as she gazed out the window, at the mist-shrouded forest, a strange feeling stirred within her, a sense of belonging. She was a part of this place, of this world, of this pact. She was a winter. She was a shifter. She was home. A feeling of uncertainty, of fear, was also stirring. And it was centered entirely on how she might cope. Chapter 6. The Price of Protection. The days that followed settled into a strange, unsettling rhythm. Rorik would leave before dawn, returning in the late afternoon or evening, his arms laden with game or supplies. He would teach her, patiently and persistently, about the lore of the werewolves, about the subtle art of sensing the energies of the forest, about the control of her burgeoning abilities. He was a demanding teacher, pushing her to her limits, but he was also surprisingly gentle, understanding the fear and uncertainty that still plagued her. He never forced her, never pressured her, always allowing her to set the pace of her own transformation. Kasha found herself drawn to him, to his quiet strength, his unwavering protectiveness, his surprising vulnerability. She learned to read the subtle shifts in his expression, the flicker of emotion in his golden eyes, the way his body tensed when he sensed danger. She learned to trust him, implicitly, with her life, with her future. But the question of the pact, of the price of his protection, still hung between them, an unspoken tension that simmered beneath the surface of their growing connection. She knew it was coming, the moment when he would reveal the full extent of her obligation, the moment when she would have to face the reality of what she had become. One evening, as they sat by the fire, sharing a simple meal of roasted rabbit and wild berries, Rorik finally broached the subject. "There is something you must understand, Kasha," he said, his voice serious, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "The pact is not simply a matter of protection. It is a bond, a joining of two souls." Kasha's heart skipped a beat. She'd sensed it, of course, the growing connection between them, the way her body responded to his presence, the way her thoughts seemed to intertwine with his. But to hear him speak the words aloud, to acknowledge the depth of their bond, sent a shiver of both excitement and apprehension through her. "A soul bond?" she whispered, the words barely audible. Rorik nodded. "It is a rare and powerful thing, Kasha. It means that we are connected on a level that transcends the physical. We can feel each other's emotions, sense each other's presence, even share each other's thoughts." He reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. The silver ring on her finger pulsed with a faint, warm light. "It is not something to be taken lightly," he continued, his voice low and intense. "It is a commitment, a responsibility, a sacrifice." Kasha's breath caught in her throat. Sacrifice. The word echoed in her mind, bringing with it a wave of unease. She knew what he was going to say, what he had to say. "The pact requires a union," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "A joining of our bloodlines, a merging of our powers. It requires us to become mates." The word hung in the air, heavy, with unspoken meaning. Mates. The term for a werewolf's chosen partner, a bond that was stronger than marriage, stronger than any human connection. A bond that was for life and beyond. Kasia stared at him, her mind reeling. She was 58 years old, a widow, a woman who had thought her days of love and passion were long behind her. And now, this creature, this wolf man, was telling her that she was bound to him, destined to become his mate. But as she stammered, unable to articulate the myriad of emotions that were swirling within her, fear, disbelief, confusion, and yes, a flicker of something else, something that felt dangerously close to desire. Rorik tightened his grip on her hand, his golden eyes searching hers. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said, his voice gentle. "But I want you to know that I will not force you. I will not claim you against your will." He paused, his gaze dropping to their intertwined hands. "The bond is there, Kasia. It is undeniable. But it is also incomplete. It needs your acceptance, your consent. It needs you to choose me." His words offered her a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in the darkness of her confusion. She had a choice. She wasn't simply a pawn in this ancient game. She had agency, power, the right to decide her own fate. But even as she clung to that hope, she knew, deep down, that her choice was already made. She'd felt it from the moment she'd stepped into Hollowfang, from the moment she'd met his gaze, from the moment he'd kissed her under the light of the full moon. She was bound to him, not just by the pact, but by something deeper, something more profound. She was drawn to him, to his wildness, to his strength, to his love. She looked at him, at his handsome face, at his golden eyes filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension, and she knew that she couldn't deny the truth any longer. As she began, her voice trembling, but her gaze steady. "I need time. Time to understand. Time to accept." Rorik nodded, his expression softening. "Take all the time you need, Kasia. I will wait. I have waited centuries for you. I can wait a little longer." But even as he said the words, a shadow crossed his face, a flicker of fear that mirrored her own. The pact was weakening. The dangers were growing. Time was running out. And a choice delayed, Kasia knew, could cost far more than just her hesitance. It could ruin everything. Chapter 7. Shadows in the Village. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of Kasia's life in Hollowfang became almost normal. She learned to identify the different plants and herbs of the forest, to track animals by their scent, to listen to the whispers of the wind. She even began to practice shifting, guided by Rorik, though the process was still awkward and incomplete, more a clumsy stumble than a graceful transformation. The thought of returning to Oakhaven, to her old life, became increasingly distant, a fading memory. Yet a nagging unease persisted. She worried about Mrs. Abernathy, about her small cottage with its untended garden, about the whispers and rumors that must be circulating about her disappearance. One afternoon, as she and Rorik were returning from a foraging trip, they saw smoke rising in the distance, in the direction of the village. Rorik stopped abruptly, his body tensing, his nostrils flaring. "Something's wrong," he muttered, his voice low and guttural. Kasia's heart pounded with apprehension. "What is it? What do you see?" He closed his eyes, concentrating, his senses reaching out, probing the distance. "Fire," he said, his voice tight. "And fear. Panic." He opened his eyes, his golden gaze meeting hers. "We need to go. Now." He took off running, moving with a speed and agility that was both breathtaking and terrifying. Kasia struggled to keep up, her lungs burning, her legs aching, but she pushed herself, driven by a surge of adrenaline and a growing sense of dread. As they neared the village, the smell of smoke grew stronger, acrid and choking. They emerged from the trees to a scene of chaos and devastation. Several cottages were ablaze, their thatched roofs engulfed in flames. Villagers ran in panic, their faces streaked with soot and tears, carrying whatever belongings they could salvage. In the center of the village square, a group of men, armed with torches and pitchforks, were confronting something. Kasha couldn't see clearly through the smoke and the milling crowd, but she heard the snarls, the growls, the terrifying sounds of a struggle. "Hunters," Rorik growled, his voice laced with fury. "They've found us." He started forward, his body transforming, his muscles bulging, his bones shifting, his clothes tearing as he began to change into his wolf form. But Kasha grabbed his arm, holding him back. "No," she pleaded. "You can't. They'll kill you." He looked at her, his eyes, now fully wolf, burning with a mixture of rage and frustration. "I have to protect them," he growled, his voice a deep, guttural rumble. "It is my duty." "But you can't do it alone," Kasha argued. "They're too many. And they're armed." She looked around, desperately searching for a solution. Her gaze fell on the village well, its stone structure still intact amidst the surrounding devastation. An idea, desperate and reckless, sparked in her mind. "The water," she said, her voice urgent. "We can use the water." Rorik hesitated, his wolf instincts warring with his human reason. But he saw the determination in her eyes, the spark of power that was growing stronger with each passing day. He nodded, a silent agreement. He transformed back into his human form, his clothes ripped and tattered, his body covered in scratches and bruises. He followed her as she ran towards the well, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She reached the well and, drawing on the power she'd been learning to control, she focused her will on the water within. She felt the connection, the surge of energy, the ancient magic that flowed through her blood, through the earth, through the very stones of the well. She raised her hands, and the water responded, rising from the depths of the well, forming a swirling vortex, a miniature tidal wave. She directed it towards the burning cottages, towards the hunters, her will unwavering, her focus absolute. The water crashed down, extinguishing the flames, scattering the hunters, disrupting their attack. They cried out in surprise and fear, their torches extinguished, their weapons useless against the force of the water. Rorik, taking advantage of the confusion, charged into the fray, his wolf form a blur of motion, driving the hunters back, forcing them to retreat. The villagers, seeing the tide turn, rallied, picking up whatever they could find, sticks, stones, tools, and joining the fight. The battle was fierce and brutal, but short-lived. The hunters, outnumbered and outmatched, were forced to flee, disappearing back into the forest, leaving behind a scene of smoldering ruins and shaken survivors. Kasha stood by the well, exhausted but exhilarated, the water receding back into its depths. She had done it. She had used her power, her magic, to protect the village, to save Rorik, to fulfill, in some small way, the obligations of the pact. Rorik, now back in his human form, approached her, his face streaked with soot and blood, but his golden eyes shining with pride and something more. "You did it," he said, his voice hoarse. "You saved them." Kasha shook her head. "We saved them," she corrected, her gaze meeting his.
Together.
A small, knowing, relieved smile curved his lips. He offered her his hand. A hand, she realized, that she instinctively wanted to take. But in the distance, a baby cried, and a woman sobbed, and Kasha remembered where she was, what had almost been lost. Chapter 8. The Hunter's Moon Rises. The aftermath of the attack left Oakhaven scarred, but not broken. The villagers, shaken but resilient, began the arduous task of rebuilding their homes, their lives. Kasha, despite her initial reluctance, found herself drawn into the effort, using her knowledge of herbs and healing to tend to the injured, her newfound strength to help clear debris, her quiet presence to offer comfort and solace. Rorik, too, played a crucial role, his wolf senses helping to locate missing villagers, his strength and endurance proving invaluable in the rebuilding process. He moved between the human and wolf worlds with an ease that both impressed and unsettled Kasha, a constant reminder of the duality of his nature, of the power that lay dormant within him and within her. The attack, however, had also revealed a stark truth. The hunters were not a random threat, a sporadic danger. They were organized, determined, and they knew about the werewolves of Hollowfang.
They knew about the pact.
They knew about her. Rorik became increasingly vigilant, his patrols extending further into the forest, his senses constantly on alert. He insisted that Kasha remain close to the cabin, restricting her movements, limiting her exposure. He was afraid for her, afraid of what the hunters might do if they discovered her true identity, her connection to the pact. "They are hunting us, Kasha," he explained one evening, as they sat by the fire, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on his worried face. "They are not just after the wolves. They are after you. You are the key to breaking the pact, to destroying everything we have fought to protect." Kasha felt a chill run down her spine. She was the target. She was the prize. She was the weapon that could be used against them.
But why?
She asked, her voice laced with fear and confusion. Why are they so determined to break the pact? Rorik sighed, his gaze fixed on the flames. "There are many reasons," he said. "Some fear us, some hate us, some believe we are an abomination, a threat to their way of life. But there are others, more powerful, more dangerous, who have a deeper motive." He paused, his expression darkening. "There are those who seek to control the magic of Hollowfang, to harness its power for their own selfish purposes. They believe that breaking the pact will unleash that power, will give them access to the ancient secrets that lie hidden within this forest." He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of anger and determination. "We cannot let them succeed, Kasha. We must protect the pact, protect the forest, protect each other." The full moon, the hunter's moon, was rising, casting an eerie, silvery glow over the landscape. Rorik's body tensed, his muscles rippling beneath his skin. He was feeling the pull of the moon, the surge of power that came with the transformation. "Tonight we hunt," he said, his voice a low growl. "We will find these hunters, and we will stop them." Kasha felt a surge of fear, but also a strange sense of excitement. She was a part of this now, a part of this fight. She couldn't stand idly by while Rorik risked his life to protect her, to protect their world. "I'm coming with you," she said, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering. Rorik hesitated, his protective instincts warring with his respect for her growing strength. "It is too dangerous, Kasha," he protested. "You are not ready." "I may not be a wolf," she countered, "but I am not helpless. I can use my magic, my knowledge of the forest to help you." She stood up, her body radiating a newfound confidence, a sense of purpose that she'd never felt before. She was a Winter, a descendant of powerful women, a protector of the pact. She would not cower in fear. She would fight. Rorik looked at her, his golden eyes searching hers, seeing the determination, the fire that burned within her. He knew he couldn't stop her. He wouldn't stop her. He nodded, a silent acceptance. "Then come," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But stay close to me. And be careful." He transformed then, his body shifting, his bones cracking, his muscles rippling, his clothes tearing as he became the magnificent, terrifying creature of the night. The wolf. Kasha felt a shiver of awe and fear as she gazed at him, at his powerful form, his gleaming fur, his burning golden eyes. But beneath the fear, there was also a sense of connection, a recognition. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and touched his fur, feeling the warmth, the power, the wildness that emanated from him. He nuzzled her hand, a gesture of affection, of trust, of love. And as the hunter's moon bathed them in its silvery light, they turned and ran into the forest, together, two souls bound by an ancient pact, ready to face the darkness, ready to fight for their future. The night thrummed with anticipation, a symphony of fear and hope. Kasha pressed closer to Rorik's side, knowing that the hunt would change everything again. Chapter 9. Scars of the Past. The hunt was a blur of motion, a symphony of sounds and scents that overwhelmed Kasha's senses. Rorik, in his wolf form, moved with a speed and agility that was breathtaking, his powerful legs carrying him effortlessly through the dense undergrowth, his keen nose tracking the scent of the hunters. Kasha, struggling to keep up, relied on her own growing abilities, her heightened senses, her connection to the forest to guide her. She could feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, the rustling of leaves in the wind, the fear and anger of the hunters, their presence a dark stain on the pristine landscape. They tracked them for hours, following their trail through the tangled woods, across rocky streams, up steep hillsides. The hunters were skilled, elusive, leaving few traces, but Rorik's determination was unwavering, his wolf instincts driving him forward. As they neared their quarry, Rorik slowed, his body tensing, his senses on high alert. He nudged Kasha with his head, a silent warning to be cautious. They crept forward, concealed by the shadows, until they reached a small clearing. In the center, a group of hunters were gathered around a campfire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. They were a rough-looking bunch, clad in leather and fur, armed with crossbows and knives, their faces hardened by years of living on the edge. But it was the man standing slightly apart from the others who caught Kasha's attention. He was tall and imposing, with a stern face and cold, calculating eyes. He wore a long, black coat, and a silver amulet hung around his neck, a symbol of authority, of power. Rorik growled softly, his body vibrating with barely suppressed rage. "Silas," he whispered, his voice a low, guttural rumble. "The leader of the hunters." Kasha felt a chill run down her spine. She'd heard Rorik speak of Silas before, of his ruthlessness, his hatred of werewolves, his obsession with breaking the pact. He was a dangerous man, a formidable enemy. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Rorik hesitated, his wolf instincts warring with his human reason. He wanted to charge in, to attack, to tear Silas limb from limb. But he knew it was too risky, too dangerous. They were outnumbered, outgunned. "We observe," he said, his voice tight with restraint. "We learn their plans, their weaknesses. And then we strike." They watched as Silas addressed the hunters, his voice carrying clearly through the night air. He spoke of the werewolves of Hollowfang, of their power, their threat, their alliance with a witch. Kasha's heart skipped a beat. A witch? Was he talking about her? "The pact must be broken," Silas declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "The power of Hollowfang must be unleashed. And the witch, she must be eliminated." He raised his hand, and the hunters cheered, their voices a chorus of hatred and bloodlust. Rorik growled again, his body trembling with fury. He was about to charge, to risk everything, but Kasha stopped him, placing a hand on his fur. "Wait," she whispered. "Listen." Silas was continuing his speech, revealing his plan. He spoke of a ritual, an ancient ceremony that would break the pact, unleash the magic of Hollowfang, and destroy the werewolves. He spoke of a specific location, a hidden glade deep within the forest, where the ritual would take place. He spoke of a specific time, the next full moon. Kasha felt a surge of hope. They had the information they needed. They knew the hunters' plans, their location, their timeline. They had a chance to stop them. "We need to go," she said, her voice urgent. "We need to warn the others." Rorik nodded, his agreement evident in the shift of his powerful shoulders. They retreated silently, melting back into the shadows, leaving the hunters to their dark plans. As they made their way back to the cabin, Rorik, still in his wolf form, slowed his pace, allowing Kasha to keep up. He nudged her gently with his head, a gesture of concern, of affection. She reached out and stroked his fur, feeling the warmth, the power, the connection that bound them together. She was no longer afraid of his wolf form, of his wildness. She saw it as a part of him, a part of who he was, a part of what she was becoming. They reached the cabin, and Rorik transformed back into his human form, his clothes torn and ragged, his body covered in scratches and bruises. He looked exhausted, but his eyes, now human again, shone with a fierce determination. "We have to prepare," he said, his voice hoarse. "We have to gather the others, warn them of the hunters' plans. We have to fight." He looked at Kasha, his gaze searching hers. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. "Are you ready to face what is coming?" Kasha met his gaze, her heart pounding, but her spirit unwavering. She was a Winter, a protector of the pact, a woman bound to a werewolf by an ancient bond, by a love that was growing stronger with each passing day. "I am," she said, her voice firm, her gaze steady. "I'm ready." But as she spoke the words, she felt a twinge of pain, a sharp ache in her chest. She looked down and saw it, a long, deep scratch on her arm, a wound she hadn't noticed during the hunt, a wound that was glowing faintly with a silvery light. A wound, she suddenly understood with sickening clarity, made not by a branch, but by a silver blade. And the memory that unfolded in her mind Silas, in a moment of rage, slashing at her, whispering the word curse made her blood run cold. Chapter 10. A Dance of Desire and Fear. The discovery of a silver-laced wound sent a wave of fear and dread through Kasha. Silver, she knew, was toxic to werewolves, a poison that could weaken, even kill, them. But the faint, silvery glow emanating from the scratch suggested something darker, more sinister. Rorik, seeing the look on her face, the way she was clutching her arm, rushed to her side. "What is it?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "What's wrong?" She showed him the wound, her hand trembling. "Silas," she whispered. He cut me with a silver blade."
And he said something.
"Curse." Rorik's eyes widened in horror. He gently examined the scratch, his fingers tracing the edges of the wound, his touch surprisingly gentle. He could feel the taint of the silver, the dark magic that clung to it, the curse. "He's marked you," he said, his voice low and grim. "He's placed a curse on you." Kasha's heart pounded in her chest. A curse? What kind of curse? What would it do to her? What does it mean? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Rorik hesitated, his expression troubled. "I don't know the specifics," he admitted. "But Silas is a practitioner of dark magic. He is capable of terrible things." He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "We need to find someone who can help us," he said. "Someone who understands these curses. Someone who can remove it." He thought for a moment, his mind racing. "There is an old woman," he said, "who lives deep in the forest. She is a healer, a wise woman. She may know how to help you." Kasha nodded, her mind reeling. She was cursed, marked by a dangerous enemy, her life hanging in the balance. But she wasn't alone. She had Rorik. And she had her own growing power, her own connection to the magic of Hollowfang. They set out immediately, Rorik guiding her through the darkest, most treacherous parts of the forest, his senses on high alert, protecting her from any potential threats. The journey was long and arduous, but Kasha didn't complain. She was driven by a desperate hope, a determination to survive, to overcome this new challenge. As they traveled, the wound on her arm began to throb, the pain intensifying, the silvery glow spreading. She felt weak, drained, her energy sapped by the curse. She stumbled, her legs giving way beneath her. Rorik caught her before she fell, his arms wrapping around her, holding her close. He could feel her weakness, her pain, the dark magic that was consuming her. "Kasha," he whispered, his voice filled with anguish.
"Hold on.
"We're almost there." He lifted her into his arms, carrying her effortlessly, his powerful body a source of strength and comfort. She rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his body, the scent of pine and wolf that had become so familiar, so comforting. She closed her eyes, focusing on his presence, on his love, on the bond that connected them. It was a lifeline, a source of strength, a beacon in the darkness. But even as she clung to him, she felt the curse growing stronger, its dark tendrils wrapping around her heart, poisoning her mind, whispering doubts, fears, insecurities. She saw visions, flashes of her past, of her failures, of her losses, of her grief. She saw Thomas, her dead husband, his face contorted in pain, his voice accusing her of moving on, of betraying him. "You don't deserve him," The vision whispered, "You don't deserve happiness. You are cursed. You are doomed." Kasha cried out, her body racked with sobs. "No," she whispered. "It's not true. I love him." Rorik stopped, his arms tightening around her, his voice a soothing balm to her tortured soul. "Kasha," he said, "it's the curse. It's trying to break you. Don't listen to it. Fight it." He kissed her then, a desperate, passionate kiss that was both a plea and a promise. It was a kiss of love, of hope, of defiance. It was a kiss that awakened something deep within her, a surge of power, of resilience, of fire. She responded, her lips meeting his, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressing against his. It was a dance of desire and fear, of love and desperation, of two souls clinging to each other in the face of darkness. The kiss broke the spell, shattering the visions, silencing the whispers, pushing back the darkness. Kasha gasped, her breath coming in ragged sobs, her body trembling, but her mind clear. I won't let it break me," she said, her voice weak, but determined. "I won't let it win." Rorik held her close, his gaze filled with love and admiration.
"I know you won't," he said.
"You are stronger than you think, Kasha. You are winter. You are my mate." The word, spoken with such tenderness, such conviction, sent a wave of warmth through her, a sense of belonging, of completion. She was his mate, and he was hers. They continued their journey, their hearts intertwined, their souls bound together, their love a shield against the darkness, a beacon of hope in the face of despair. But the remnants of Silas's curse left a lingering unease, a question that lingered in the air around them. Would they ever truly be free of him? Chapter 11. The Unveiling of Secrets. The old woman's dwelling was even more secluded than Rorik's cabin, nestled deep within a grove of ancient yew trees, their gnarled branches intertwined, creating a canopy of perpetual twilight. The air here felt heavy, thick with the scent of herbs and earth, of old magic and forgotten secrets. The cabin itself was a small, ramshackle structure, built of stone and wood, its roof covered in moss and lichen. Smoke curled from a crooked chimney, hinting at a fire burning within. Rorik approached cautiously, his senses on high alert. He knew that the old woman, Alara, was powerful, unpredictable, and not always friendly. She was a recluse, a hermit, a guardian of ancient knowledge, a keeper of secrets. He knocked on the door, a heavy, wooden slab that looked as old as the trees themselves. There was a moment of silence, then a raspy voice called out from within. "Who's there?" "It is Rorik of Hollowfang," he replied, his voice respectful. "I seek your help." The door creaked open, revealing a tiny, wizened woman, her face a tapestry of wrinkles, her eyes as bright and sharp as a hawk's. She wore a simple dress of homespun cloth, and a necklace of bones and feathers hung around her neck. "Rorik," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "What brings you to my doorstep?" He gestured towards Kasha, who stood beside him, her arm wrapped in a makeshift bandage, her face pale and drawn. "This is Kasha Winter," he said. "She has been cursed by Silas." Alara's eyes narrowed, focusing on Kasha, her gaze piercing, assessing. She saw the mark of the curse, the faint silvery glow that emanated from the wound, the darkness that clung to her aura. "Silas," she muttered, her voice filled with disgust. "That foul creature. He meddles with powers he does not understand." She beckoned them inside, her movements surprisingly agile for her age. The cabin was small and cluttered, filled with strange objects, dried herbs hanging from the rafters, jars of colorful powders lining the shelves, bones and feathers scattered on the floor, books and scrolls piled on every surface. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing towards a low stool. Kasha obeyed, sinking gratefully onto the stool, her legs weak and trembling. Rorik stood beside her, his presence a source of comfort and strength. Alara examined the wound, her fingers tracing the edges of the curse, her touch sending a jolt of both pain and relief through Kasha. "It is a dark curse," she said, her voice grim. A binding curse. It is meant to weaken you, to drain your power, to control you. Kasha's heart sank. Control? Was that Silas's ultimate goal? To control her, to use her as a weapon against Rorik, against the werewolves of Hollowfang?
Can you remove it?
Rorik asked, his voice urgent. Alara hesitated, her expression troubled.
It is not a simple matter, she said.
The curse is strong, deeply rooted. It will require sacrifice. Sacrifice. The word echoed in the small space, bringing with it a wave of dread. What kind of sacrifice? What would be required to break this curse? What kind of sacrifice? Kasha asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alara looked at her, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and understanding. The curse is tied to your blood, she explained. To your lineage. To your connection to Silas. Kasha frowned. Connection to Silas? What did that mean? She'd never met the man before the attack on the village.
I don't understand, she said.
I have no connection to Silas. Alara smiled sadly. You do, child, she said. You just don't know it.
Yet.
She turned to Rorik. The truth is hidden, she said. Buried deep in the past. You must uncover it if you wish to save her. Rorik nodded, his expression determined.
Tell me what I need to know, he said.
Tell me how to find the truth. Alara gestured towards a stack of old, leather-bound books. The answers lie within those pages, she said. The history of your families, of the pact, of the feud. Feud? Kasha's mind reeled. A feud between her family and Silas's? What was this all about? Rorik began to pore over the books, his brow furrowed in concentration, his fingers tracing the faded script, the ancient symbols. Kasha watched him, her heart filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. As he read, his expression changed, his eyes widening in disbelief, his face paling with shock. He looked up at Kasha, his gaze filled with a mixture of horror and pity.
Kasha, he said, his voice trembling.
There's something you need to know. Something about your family, about Silas. He hesitated, as if reluctant to speak the words, as if the truth was too terrible to utter. But he knew he had to tell her. He had to reveal the secret that had been hidden for so long, the secret that held the key to breaking the curse, to saving her life. The air crackled with unspoken revelations. Alara watched them both, her silence a heavy weight in the tiny room. Silas, Rorik began, his voice rough with emotion. He is your brother. Chapter 12. Blood and Betrayal. The revelation struck Kasha like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of her, leaving her gasping for breath. Brother? Silas, the ruthless hunter, the man who had cursed her, who sought to destroy the werewolves, her brother? It was impossible. Absurd.
A lie.
No, she whispered, shaking her head, her mind reeling. It's not true.
It can't be.
Rorik reached out, his hand covering hers, his touch a grounding force in the storm of her disbelief. It is true, Kasha, he said, his voice gentle but firm. The books, they tell the story. Your father, he had a secret. A life before he met your mother. He explained, slowly, carefully, the details he had gleaned from the ancient texts. Kasha's father, Elias Winter, had been a member of a different family, a family of hunters, sworn enemies of the werewolves. He had fallen in love with a woman from that family, a woman named Seraphina. They had a child, a son, Silas. But Elias had grown disillusioned with the hunters' ways, with their hatred, their violence. He had renounced his family, changed his name, and fled, seeking a new life, a life of peace. He had met Kasha's mother, fallen in love, and settled in Oakhaven, hoping to leave his past behind. But the past, it seemed, had a way of catching up. Seraphina, consumed by bitterness and revenge, had raised Silas to hate his father, to hate the werewolves, to seek vengeance for the perceived betrayal. She had trained him in the dark arts, instilled in him a desire for power, a lust for control. Silas believes that you are a symbol of his father's betrayal, Rorik explained. He believes that by destroying you, by breaking the pact, he will avenge his mother, reclaim his birthright. Kasha stared at him, her mind struggling to process this new reality, this twisted family history that had shaped her life, her destiny, without her even knowing it. She was the daughter of a hunter, the sister of a monster. But why didn't my father ever tell me? She asked, her voice filled with pain and confusion. Why did he keep it a secret? Rorik sighed. He was afraid, he said. Afraid of what Silas might do, afraid of what you might think of him. He wanted to protect you, to shield you from the darkness of his past. Kasha felt a wave of grief wash over her, a grief not just for her father, but for the life she had never known, for the brother she had never met, for the twisted path that had led her to this moment. Alara, who had been silent until now, spoke, her voice raspy but firm. The past is a powerful force, she said. It shapes us, defines us, but it does not control us. You have a choice, Kasha. You can succumb to the darkness, to the hatred, to the curse. Or you can rise above it. You can choose your own path. She looked at Kasha, her eyes piercing, seeing through her, to the core of her being. The curse is tied to your blood, to your lineage, she said. But it can be broken. By severing the connection, by rejecting the hatred, by embracing love.
Love.
The word echoed in the small space, a beacon of hope in the darkness of betrayal and despair. Kasha looked at Rorik, at his golden eyes filled with love and concern, at his strong, reassuring presence. He was her anchor, her lifeline, her mate. I choose love, she said, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering. I choose Rorik. I choose the pact. I choose life. Alara nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. Then there is hope, she said. But the path will not be easy. The sacrifice, it will be great. She explained the ritual, the steps that needed to be taken to break the curse. It would require a powerful spell, a combination of herbs and incantations, a channeling of the ancient magic of Hollowfang. And it would require a confrontation. You must face Silas, Alara said, her voice grave. You must confront him, not with violence, but with truth. You must show him the error of his ways, the futility of his hatred. You must offer him redemption. Kasha's heart pounded in her chest. Face Silas?
Confront him?
Offer him redemption? It seemed impossible. He was a monster, a killer, a man consumed by darkness. How could she possibly reach him? But she knew she had to try. For Rorik, for the werewolves, for herself. She had to break the curse, sever the connection, and the feud that had plagued her family for generations. I will do it, she said, her voice trembling, but her spirit resolute. I will face him. Rorik squeezed her hand, his gaze filled with love and admiration. I will be with you, he said, every step of the way. Alara nodded, satisfied. Then prepare yourselves, she said. The time is near. The hunter's moon wanes, but it isn't gone yet, and a sliver of its power remains. We must use the residual light. And we must use it now. The air in the cabin crackled with anticipation, with the weight of unspoken fears, with a glimmer of hope. Kasha looked at Rorik, and with the last bit of moonlight shining through the small window as witness, she nodded. Chapter 13. The Call of the Wild Heart. The ritual to break the curse was unlike anything Kasha had ever experienced. Alara, chanting in a language older than time, moved with a surprising agility, her wizened hands weaving intricate patterns in the air, drawing power from the earth, from the remnants of the hunter's moon, from the very essence of Hollowfang. The cabin was filled with the scent of burning herbs, their smoke swirling around Kasha, filling her lungs, her senses, her very being. She felt the magic coursing through her veins, tingling in her fingertips, resonating in her bones. It was a power both exhilarating and terrifying, a force that both connected her to the world and threatened to consume her. Rorik stood beside her, his presence a grounding force, his hand clasped tightly in hers. He was her anchor, her lifeline, her connection to the human world, to the love that had blossomed between them, a love that defied the ancient feud, the dark curse, the looming confrontation. Elara placed a hand on Kasha's forehead, her touch sending a jolt of energy through her, a surge of power that awakened something deep within her, something primal, something wild. "Embrace your heritage," Elara whispered, her voice raspy but firm. "Embrace the wolf within. Let it guide you, protect you, empower you." Kasha closed her eyes, focusing on the sensations coursing through her body, on the connection to Rorik, on the magic of Hollowfang. She felt a shift, a change, a transformation. It wasn't a physical transformation, not yet, but an internal one, a awakening of her true nature, of her wolf spirit. She felt a surge of confidence, of courage, of freedom. She was no longer just Kasha Winter, the grieving widow, the ordinary woman. She was a part of something greater, something ancient, something powerful. She was a Winter, a protector of the pact, a woman bound to a werewolf by love and destiny. The curse, which had felt like a heavy weight on her chest, a dark cloud hanging over her, began to recede, its power diminishing, its grip loosening. She felt lighter, stronger, more alive. Elara removed her hand, her eyes shining with satisfaction. "The curse is weakened," she said, "but it is not yet broken. The final step it is yours to take." She gestured towards the door, towards the forest, towards the looming confrontation with Silas.
"Go," she said.
"Face your brother. Speak your truth. And may the spirits of Hollowfang guide you." Kasha took a deep breath, the scent of pine and wolf filling her lungs, steadying her nerves, bolstering her courage. She looked at Rorik, her gaze filled with love and determination.
"I'm ready," she said.
He nodded, his golden eyes reflecting her own resolve. "Then let us go," he said. Together. They stepped out of the cabin, into the night, the remnants of the hunter's moon a mere sliver in the sky, but its silvery light guiding their way. The forest felt different now, alive, vibrant, welcoming. She was a part of it, and it was a part of her. As they walked, Kasha felt a strange sensation, a tingling in her limbs, a heightened awareness of her surroundings. She could hear the rustling of leaves, the hooting of owls, the distant howl of a wolf, all with a clarity she'd never experienced before. She looked at her hands and saw a faint, silvery glow emanating from them, a sign of her own burgeoning power, of her connection to the moon, to the magic of Hollowfang. She was changing, transforming, not just physically but internally, embracing her true nature, her wolf spirit. It was a terrifying and exhilarating feeling, a sense of liberation, of becoming something more. Rorik, sensing the change in her, smiled, a proud, loving smile that warmed her heart.
"You are finding your way," he said.
"You are becoming one of us." The words, spoken with such tenderness, such acceptance, filled her with a sense of belonging, of home. She was one of them. She was a part of this pack, this family, this love. But even as she embraced this new reality, she knew that the greatest challenge still lay ahead. She had to face Silas, her brother, the man who had cursed her, the man who sought to destroy everything she held dear. She had to confront him, not with violence, but with truth, with love, with the hope of redemption. It was a daunting task, a seemingly impossible mission. But she was no longer afraid. She was a Winter. She was a shifter. She was a woman in love. And she was ready to fight. The forest echoed with her newfound confidence, a silent roar that promised a reckoning. A howl built in her chest. She wasn't ready to release it. Not yet. But it was there, waiting. Chapter 14. Broken Bonds, Forged Anew. They found Silas in the hidden glade, the same location he had revealed during the hunters' gathering. He stood alone, in the center of a circle of stones, his hands raised towards the sliver of moon that remained in the sky, his face illuminated by a strange, ethereal glow. He was chanting, his voice low and guttural, the words of an ancient incantation, a spell to break the pact, to unleash the magic of Hollowfang. Rorik, in his wolf form, growled softly, his body tensing, his instincts screaming at him to attack, to stop Silas before it was too late. But Kasha placed a hand on his fur, holding him back. "No," she whispered. "This is my fight." She stepped forward, into the clearing, her heart pounding, her mind racing, her spirit steeled for the confrontation. Silas stopped chanting, his eyes snapping open, his gaze focusing on Kasha. He stared at her, his expression a mixture of surprise, disbelief, and hatred. "You," he hissed, his voice laced with venom. "The traitor's daughter."
The witch.
Kasha met his gaze, her own unwavering, her voice firm despite the tremor in her heart. "I am Kasha Winter," she said. "And I am your sister." Silas laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed through the clearing. "Sister?"
He scoffed.
"You are no sister of mine. You are a disgrace, a betrayal of our family, of our heritage. Our father chose a different path," Kasha said, her voice gaining strength. "He chose love over hate, peace over violence. He chose me." "He chose weakness," Silas retorted. "He abandoned his duty, his responsibility, his power." He raised his hands again, resuming his chanting, his voice growing louder, the magic in the air thickening, crackling with energy. "I will not let you break the pact," Kasha said, her voice rising above his. "I will not let you destroy Hollowfang." She stepped closer, her own power surging within her, the silvery glow emanating from her hands intensifying. She felt the connection to the earth, to the moon, to the magic that flowed through her veins, through the forest, through Rorik. "You cannot stop me," Silas sneered. "The curse has weakened you. You are no match for my power." "The curse is broken," Kasha countered. "Thanks to the love of a man you would call an enemy. A love I choose." She reached out, her hand hovering over the circle of stones, her fingers tingling with energy. She focused her will, her intention, on disrupting Silas's spell, on severing his connection to the dark magic he was wielding. She felt the resistance, a pushback, a force trying to repel her, to keep her from interfering. But she held firm, her determination unwavering, her love for Rorik, for the werewolves, for Hollowfang, fueling her power. The air crackled with energy, the ground trembled beneath their feet, the clash of their wills creating a vortex of light and shadow. Silas cried out in frustration, his chanting faltering, his control slipping. "Stop," he roared. "You don't know what you're doing. You'll destroy everything." "I'm saving everything," Kasha retorted. "I'm saving it from you." She pushed harder, her power surging, her will bending the magic to her command. The circle of stones began to crack, the ethereal glow surrounding Silas fading, his connection to the dark forces weakening. He stumbled, his body racked with pain, his face contorted in anger and fear. He looked at Kasha, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and something else. Something that looked like regret.
"Why?"
he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Why are you doing this?" Kasha met his gaze, her heart aching for the brother she had never known, for the man consumed by hatred and bitterness. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Because I believe in love, in peace, in forgiveness." She lowered her hand, the magic receding, the vortex dissipating, the clearing returning to normal. Silas stood there, weakened, defeated, his power broken. He looked at Kasha, his eyes searching hers, seeing the truth in her gaze, the sincerity in her words, the love that she offered him. He fell to his knees, his body shaking with sobs, his face buried in his hands. I don't understand," he whispered. "I don't know what to do." Kasha approached him cautiously, her heart filled with compassion, with a glimmer of hope. She knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," she said, her voice gentle. "You don't have to do this alone. We can help you.
"We can heal you."
Rorik, now back in his human form, joined them, his presence a silent support, a testament to the bond that had been forged between them, a bond that transcended hatred, that embraced forgiveness, that offered a new beginning. Silas looked up at them, his eyes filled with tears, with confusion, with a flicker of hope. He had been so lost, so consumed by darkness, that he had forgotten what it felt like to be loved, to be accepted, to be forgiven. He reached out, his hand trembling, and took Kasha's, his fingers intertwining with hers. It was a gesture of surrender, of acceptance, of reconciliation. The bonds of hatred, of betrayal, of the ancient feud were broken. And in their place, new bonds were forged, bonds of love, of forgiveness, of family. The forest seemed to sigh in relief, the tension easing, the darkness receding, the light returning. Kasha looked at Rorik, a genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Chapter 15. The Storm Within. The reconciliation with Silas was not a sudden, magical transformation. It was a slow, arduous process, fraught with setbacks, with moments of doubt, with the lingering shadows of his past, of his hatred, of the dark magic that had consumed him for so long. He struggled to accept Kasha as a sister, to reconcile his ingrained beliefs with the reality of her love, of Rorik's acceptance, of the werewolf's willingness to forgive him. He was haunted by guilt, by remorse, by the terrible things he had done, by the curse he had placed on Kasha. But Kasha, with her unwavering patience, her boundless compassion, her growing understanding of the power of love and forgiveness, persisted. She spent hours with him, talking, listening, sharing stories of their father, of their shared heritage, of the life he had never known. Rorik, too, played a crucial role, offering Silas a model of strength, of resilience, of the possibility of redemption. He shared his own experiences, his own struggles with the darker aspects of his wolf nature, his own journey towards balance, towards peace. Slowly, gradually, Silas began to change. He started to question his beliefs, to challenge his assumptions, to open himself to the possibility of a different path, a different future. He began to see the werewolves not as monsters, but as creatures with their own culture, their own struggles, their own capacity for love and loyalty. He even began to show an interest in Kasha's growing abilities, in her connection to the magic of Hollowfang, in her wolf spirit. He saw in her a reflection of his own lost potential, of the life he could have had if he had chosen a different path. But the darkness within him was not easily vanquished. It lingered, a constant threat, a storm brewing beneath the surface of his fragile peace. He was prone to outbursts of anger, of frustration, of despair. He was tormented by nightmares, by visions of the past, by the fear of relapsing, of succumbing to the dark forces that still held a grip on his soul. One evening, as they were sitting by the fire in Rorik's cabin, Silas had one such outburst. He had been quiet, withdrawn, his mood darkening throughout the day. Suddenly, he exploded, his voice filled with rage and self-loathing. "I don't deserve this," he shouted, his eyes wild, his hands clenched into fists. "I don't deserve your kindness, your forgiveness. I am a monster. I should be dead." Kasha tried to calm him, to reason with him, but he pushed her away, his anger escalating. He stormed out of the cabin, disappearing into the darkness of the forest, his footsteps echoing with a desperate, frantic energy. Rorik, alarmed, started to follow him, his wolf instincts urging him to protect Silas, to prevent him from harming himself or others. But Kasha stopped him, placing a hand on his arm.
"No," she said.
"Let me go. I think I can reach him." She had sensed something in Silas's outburst, a flicker of vulnerability, a cry for help, a desperate need for connection. She knew that she was the only one who could reach him, the only one who could understand the darkness that tormented him, the only one who could offer him the love and acceptance he so desperately craved. She followed Silas into the forest, her heart pounding, her mind racing, her senses on high alert. She found him by the same stream where they had fought, where she had broken his spell, where he had surrendered. He was sitting on a rock, his head in his hands, his body shaking with sobs. He looked broken, defeated, lost. Kasha approached him cautiously, her footsteps soft on the damp earth. She sat beside him, not speaking, not touching him, just offering him her presence, her silent support. After a long moment, Silas looked up, his eyes red and swollen, his face streaked with tears. I can't do this, he whispered, his voice hoarse. The darkness, it's too strong. I can't control it. Kasha reached out and took his hand, her touch gentle but firm.
You are not alone, she said.
We are here for you. We will help you. She spoke of her own struggles, of her own fears, of her own journey towards embracing her true nature, her wolf spirit. She spoke of the power of love, of forgiveness, of hope. You are not a monster, Silas, she said, her voice filled with compassion. You are a man, a brother, a friend, and you are loved. Her words, spoken with such sincerity, such conviction, seemed to penetrate the darkness that surrounded him, reaching the core of his being, awakening something within him, a spark of light. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers, seeing the truth in her gaze, the love in her heart, the acceptance that she offered him. He squeezed her hand, his grip tightening, a silent acknowledgement, a sign of surrender. He leaned his head against her shoulder, his body relaxing, his sobs subsiding. The storm within him began to calm, the darkness receding, the light returning. He was not healed, not completely, but he was on the path. And he was not alone. He now also belonged. Kasha sighed in relief. They returned to the cabin, and Rorik's eyes said everything. He understood. Chapter 16. A love forbidden, a fate embraced. With Silas slowly finding his footing on the path to redemption, a fragile peace settled over Hollowfang. Kasha, however, found her own internal landscape shifting, the calm surface disturbed by the increasingly undeniable currents of her feelings for Rorik. What had begun as a bond of necessity, a pact sealed in moonlight and fear, had blossomed into something deeper, something richer, something that both terrified and exhilarated her. She loved him. She loved his strength, his gentleness, his unwavering protectiveness, his surprising vulnerability. She loved the way he looked at her, the way he touched her, the way he made her feel alive. But their love was complicated, fraught with challenges, shadowed by the lingering remnants of the past, by the differences in their natures, by the forbidden aspect of their union. She was a woman in her late 50s, a widow, a human who had only recently discovered her werewolf heritage. He was a creature of the night, a centuries-old being, bound by ancient laws, by the expectations of his pack, by the wildness within him. Could they truly bridge the gap between their worlds? Could they overcome the obstacles, the prejudices, the dangers that threatened to tear them apart? One evening, as they sat by the fire, sharing a quiet moment, Kasha decided to voice her concerns, her doubts, her fears. Rorik, she began, her voice hesitant, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. We need to talk. He looked at her, his golden eyes searching hers, sensing the turmoil within her. What is it, Kasha? He asked, his voice gentle. What troubles you? Us, she said, her voice barely a whisper. This bond between us. This love. He reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through her, a spark of desire that both comforted and frightened her. What about it? He asked, his voice low and resonant. Is it real? She asked, her voice trembling. Can it last? We are so different, Rorik. You are a wolf, and I am still learning to be one. You are one, Kasha, he corrected gently. You embraced that tonight, as we fought the darkness, side by side. And what we share, it's the most real thing I have ever known. He tightened his grip on her hand, his gaze intense, unwavering. I love you, Kasha, he said, his voice filled with a depth of emotion that took her breath away. I have loved you since the moment I saw you, standing at the edge of the forest, your eyes filled with fear and wonder. His words, spoken with such sincerity, such conviction, melted away her doubts, her fears, her insecurities. She loved him too, with all her heart, with all her soul, with all her being. But your pack, she said, her voice still hesitant. Will they accept me? A human, an older woman, they will accept you, Rorik interrupted, his voice firm. Because you are mine. And because you are extraordinary. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin, his scent of pine and wolf filling her senses. "The pact binds us," he said, "but it is love that defines us. A love that transcends species, that defies age, that overcomes all obstacles." He kissed her then, a passionate, possessive kiss that was both a promise and a claim. It was a kiss of love, of desire, of belonging. It was a kiss that sealed their fate, that bound them together forever. Kasha responded, her lips meeting his, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressing against his. She surrendered to the moment, to the passion, to the love that consumed her, that made her feel whole, that made her feel alive. The fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls, witnessing their union, their commitment, their love. They were two souls, from different worlds, bound by an ancient pact, by a love that was forbidden, by a fate that they had chosen, a fate that they would embrace, together. But even as they lost themselves in the moment, in the passion, in the love that bound them together, a shadow lingered, a reminder of the challenges that still lay ahead, of the dangers that threatened to tear them apart. The world outside Hollowfang was still a dangerous place, filled with hunters, with prejudice, with darkness. And the pact, though renewed, was still fragile, vulnerable, constantly threatened by those who sought to break it, to exploit its power. They had found love, they had found each other, but their journey was far from over. They would have to fight for their future, for their happiness, for their love. A howl, distant and mournful, echoed through the forest. Kasha didn't know if it was a warning or a lament. But, hand in hand with Rorik, she knew that they could face anything. Together. Chapter 17. The Gathering Darkness. Despite the newfound peace within their small circle, the world outside Hollowfang remained turbulent. The hunters, though scattered and defeated, were not vanquished. They were regrouping, reorganizing, their hatred fueled by their recent losses, their determination to break the pact stronger than ever. Rorik, sensing the growing threat, became increasingly vigilant, his patrols extending further into the forest, his senses constantly on alert. He was worried, not just for Kasha, but for Silas, for the fragile peace they had achieved, for the future of Hollowfang. He knew that the hunters were not the only danger. There were other forces at play, darker, more powerful, more insidious. He had sensed them, lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike, to exploit the weakness of the pact, to unleash the magic of Hollowfang for their own selfish purposes. He tried to shield Kasha from his concerns, to protect her from the looming darkness, but she was too perceptive, too attuned to his emotions, to his fears. She knew that something was wrong, that the peace they had found was fragile, temporary, threatened. One evening, as they were walking by the stream, Kasha confronted him, her voice gentle but firm. "Rorik," she said, "what's happening?
Were you not telling me?"
He hesitated, reluctant to burden her with his worries, but he knew he couldn't keep her in the dark. He owed her the truth, the respect, the trust. He stopped walking, turning to face her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "The hunters are gathering," he said, his voice low and serious. "They are planning another attack, a larger one, more organized, more dangerous." Kasha's heart skipped a beat. Another attack? She had hoped that their victory over Silas, their reconciliation with him, would have deterred the hunters, would have brought an end to the conflict. But it seemed that hatred, like a weed, was difficult to eradicate. "But it's not just the hunters," Rorik continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There's something else, something darker, more powerful. I can feel it, lurking in the shadows." Waiting, he looked at her, his gaze intense, searching. "I fear that we are facing a threat far greater than we imagined," he said. "A threat that could destroy not just Hollowfang, but everything." Kasha felt a chill run down her spine. What was this greater threat? What was this darkness that Rorik spoke of? "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Rorik took her hand, his touch reassuring, his grip firm. "We prepare," he said. "We gather our allies. We strengthen our defenses. We fight." He explained his plan, his strategy to unite the different werewolf packs, to forge an alliance, to stand together against the common enemy. It was a risky plan, a bold move, but it was their only hope. "I need to travel," he said. "I need to meet with the other pack leaders, to convince them to join us. It will be dangerous, but it is necessary." Kasha felt a surge of fear, a fear of losing him, of being alone, of facing the darkness without him. But she knew he was right. He had to do this. They had to do this.
Together.
"When will you leave?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Tomorrow," he replied, his voice regretful. "I must go before it is too late." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, holding her tight. "I will be careful," he promised. "And I will return. I will always return to you." He kissed her then, a desperate, passionate kiss that was both a farewell and a vow. It was a kiss of love, of hope, of defiance. Kasha responded, her lips meeting his, her arms clinging to him, her body pressing against his. She poured all her love, all her fear, all her hope into that kiss, a silent promise, a bond that transcended distance, that defied danger, that would endure forever. They spent the rest of the evening together, sharing a quiet meal, talking, holding each other, savoring the precious moments, knowing that their time together was limited, that the future was uncertain, that the darkness was gathering. As Kasha lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, she heard the howls. They echoed, mournful and anxious through the forest. She knew what they meant. Rorik had called a gathering. The packs would meet, and the fate of Hollowfang would hang in the balance. Chapter 18. Echoes of the Ancient Curse. Rorik's departure left a void in Kasha's life, a silence that echoed through the cabin, through the forest, through her very soul. She missed his presence, his warmth, his strength, his love. She worried about him, about his safety, about the dangerous mission he had undertaken. She tried to keep busy, to occupy her mind, to distract herself from her fears. She tended to the garden, she practiced her magic, she spent time with Silas, who was slowly, gradually, finding his way back to the light. But the unease persisted, the sense of foreboding, the feeling that something was wrong, that the darkness was closing in. She felt it in the air, in the wind, in the rustling of leaves, in the silence of the forest. One afternoon, as she was walking by the stream, she stumbled upon something, a hidden object, buried beneath the roots of an ancient oak tree. It was a small, wooden box, intricately carved, its surface covered in strange symbols. She recognized the box, the carvings, the symbols. It was similar to the one Rorik had shown her, the one that contained the silver ring, the one that had belonged to her great-grandmother, Alara Winter. Curiosity and a strange sense of urgency compelled her to open it. Inside, she found a scroll, made of parchment, its edges frayed and yellowed with age. It was written in the same ancient language as the books in Alara's cabin, the language of the werewolves, the language of magic. She took the scroll back to the cabin, and with the help of the books, she began to decipher its contents. It was a journal, a personal account, written by Alara Winter herself, generations ago. As she read, she uncovered a hidden history, a secret that had been buried for centuries, a truth that shed new light on the pact, on the curse, on the conflict between the werewolves and the hunters. Alara Winter, it turned out, had not just been a powerful shifter, a leader of her people. She had also been a seer. She had foreseen the future, the challenges, the dangers, the darkness that threatened to consume Hollowfang. She had written of an ancient curse, a curse that predated the pact, a curse that had been placed on the land itself, on the magic that flowed through it. It was a curse of greed, of power, of control. The curse had been laid by a powerful sorcerer, a man named Mocker, who had sought to dominate Hollowfang, to exploit its magic for his own selfish purposes. He had been defeated, but his curse lingered, a dark stain on the land, a source of conflict, of suffering. The pact, Alara wrote, had been an attempt to mitigate the curse, to create a balance, to protect Hollowfang from its destructive influence. But the curse was strong, persistent, constantly seeking a way to break free, to unleash its full power. The hunters, Kasha realized, were not just driven by hatred, by fear, by prejudice. They were also, unknowingly, instruments of the curse, manipulated by its dark influence, driven to break the pact, to unleash the magic of Hollowfang, to fulfill Mocker's ancient desire. And Silas, she understood now, had not just been a victim of his mother's bitterness, of his own dark upbringing. He had also been a vessel for the curse, a conduit for its power, a pawn in its ancient game. The curse, it seemed, was not just a magical affliction, a spell that could be broken with a ritual, with a sacrifice. It was a deeper, more insidious force, a darkness that had permeated the very fabric of Hollowfang, a threat that could not be easily defeated. Kasha felt a wave of despair, a sense of hopelessness. How could they possibly fight against something so ancient, so powerful, so pervasive? But then she remembered Alara's words, her prophecy, her vision of the future. She had foreseen not just the darkness, but also the light. She had foreseen the arrival of a protector, a woman of the old blood, a woman with a strong connection to the earth, to the magic, to the wolf. She had foreseen Kasha. Kasha realized then that she was not just a pawn in this ancient game, a victim of circumstance, a woman caught in the crossfire of a centuries-old conflict. She was a key, a player, a force for change. She had the power to break the curse, to heal the land, to bring peace to Hollowfang. But it would require more than just magic, more than just strength, more than just love. It would require a sacrifice greater than any she had imagined, a sacrifice that would test her courage, her resolve, her very soul. She put the scroll down, looked at her hands, and then she looked towards the forest's edge. She knew what she needed to do. Chapter 19. The Heart's True North. The decision, once made, settled within Kasha with a quiet certainty, a sense of purpose that transcended fear, that defied doubt, that embraced destiny. She knew what she had to do, what she was meant to do. She prepared herself, not with rituals or incantations, but with quiet reflection, with a communion with the forest, with the spirit of her ancestors, with the love that bound her to Rorik, to Silas, to Hollowfang. She gathered the objects that were most precious to her. The silver ring, a symbol of her heritage, of her connection to the moon, to the magical lock of Rorik's hair. A reminder of his love, of his strength, of his presence, a small, smooth stone from the stream, a representation of the earth, of the forest, of her home. She walked to the heart of Hollowfang, to the ancient oak tree where she had found Alara's journal, the place where the curse was strongest, the place where the magic of the land converged. She stood beneath the gnarled branches, the sliver of the moon a distant witness, the wind whispering through the leaves, the earth pulsing beneath her feet. She closed her eyes, focusing on her intention, on her purpose, on her sacrifice. She spoke, her voice clear and strong, echoing through the stillness of the forest. I, Kasha Winter, descendant of Alara, protector of the pact, offer myself as a vessel, a conduit, a sacrifice. I offer my life, my spirit, my love, to heal this land, to break this curse, to bring peace to Hollowfang. She opened her eyes and saw it, a swirling vortex of energy, a convergence of light and shadow, a manifestation of the ancient curse, of the magic of Hollowfang. It was beautiful and terrifying, alluring and repulsive, a force that both threatened to consume her and promised to liberate her. She stepped forward, into the vortex, her heart pounding, her mind racing, her spirit soaring. She felt the power surge through her, tingling in her fingertips, resonating in her bones, filling her with a sense of completion. She was not afraid. She was not alone. She was connected to everything, to everyone, to the past, to the present, to the future. She felt the curse, the darkness, the hatred, the greed, the pain. But she also felt the love, the hope, the forgiveness, the light. She embraced it all, the good and the bad, the light and the shadow, the duality of existence. She became a vessel a conduit, a bridge. She channeled the power, the magic, the love, through her into the earth, into the forest, into Hollowfang. She felt the curse weakening, its grip loosening, its darkness receding. She felt the land healing, the magic balancing, the peace returning. It was a painful process, a wrenching transformation, a sacrifice of self. But it was also a liberation, a fulfillment, a rebirth. She felt herself changing, shifting, transforming, not into a wolf, not physically, but spiritually. She became one with the forest, with the magic, with the spirit of Hollowfang. She was no longer just Kasha Winter, the woman, the widow, the protector. She was something more, something greater, something eternal. She was the heart of Hollowfang. The vortex dissipated, the energy subsiding, the light fading, the peace returning. Kasha stood there, transformed, her body glowing faintly, her eyes shining with an otherworldly light, her spirit free. The curse was broken. The land was healed. The balance was restored. But the sacrifice had come at a cost. She was no longer entirely human, no longer entirely bound to the mortal realm. She was a part of Hollowfang, a guardian, a spirit, a presence. She could feel Rorik, his love, his worry, his searching. She could feel Silas, his gratitude, his remorse, his hope. She could feel the werewolves, their relief, their gratitude, their awe. She knew that she could not return to them, not in the way they expected, not in the way she desired. But she was not gone. She was everywhere, in the wind, in the trees, in the stream, in the heart of Hollowfang. She would always be with them, watching over them, protecting them, guiding them. She was their guardian, their protector, their love. A single tear, shimmering like a fallen star, traced a path down her cheek. It was a tear of sorrow, but also a tear of joy. A tear of goodbye, but also a tear of forever. And, in the distance, a wolf howled a howl not of mourning, but of homecoming. Chapter 20. The final confrontation of hearts. Rorik returned to Hollowfang, his heart heavy with foreboding, his senses on high alert. He had failed to unite the werewolf packs. Old rivalries, stubborn pride, and fear of the unknown had prevented them from forging an alliance. He was alone, or so he thought, facing a threat greater than any he had ever imagined. He raced through the forest, his wolf form a blur of motion, his instincts driving him towards the cabin, towards Kasha, towards home. But as he neared the clearing, he sensed something different, something profound. The air was charged with energy, the trees seemed to hum with a silent power, the earth pulsed with a vibrant life force. He felt Kasha's presence, but it was different, transformed, amplified. She was everywhere and yet nowhere. He shifted back to his human form, his heart pounding, his mind racing, his senses overwhelmed. He stepped into the clearing and saw her. She stood beneath the ancient oak tree, her body glowing faintly, her eyes shining with an otherworldly light, her spirit free. She was beautiful, terrifying, ethereal, a being of pure energy, of pure love. Kasha? He whispered, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. She smiled, a radiant smile that warmed his soul, that eased his fears, that filled him with hope. Rorik, she said, her voice a melodic whisper, echoing through the clearing, through the forest, through his very being. He rushed towards her, his arms reaching out to embrace her, but his hands passed through her, as if she were a ghost, a spirit, a memory. He stumbled back, his heart breaking, his mind struggling to comprehend what had happened, what she had become. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. She explained, her voice gentle but firm, telling him of Alara's journal, of the ancient curse, of her sacrifice, of her transformation. "I am the heart of Hollowfang now," she said. "I am a part of this land, a guardian, a protector, a spirit." Rorik listened, his heart aching, his mind reeling, his soul shattered. He had lost her, and yet he had not. She was gone, and yet she was everywhere. "But us," he whispered, his voice filled with pain and longing. Our love, our future, she reached out, her ethereal hand touching his cheek, her touch sending a jolt of warmth, of love, of connection through him. Our love is eternal. Rorik, she said. It transcends the physical, it defies death, it endures forever. She explained that she could still communicate with him, that she would always be with him, watching over him, guiding him, loving him. She would be the wind in his hair, the sun on his face, the moon in his sky. She would be the heart of Hollowfang, and he would be its soul. Rorik struggled to accept her transformation, her departure. He wanted her back, in his arms, in his life, in his world. But he knew he couldn't change what had happened, what she had chosen, what she had become. He knelt before her, his head bowed, his tears falling onto the earth, a testament to his grief, to his love, to his loss. I will honor your sacrifice, Kasha, he vowed, his voice choked with emotion. I will protect Hollowfang. I will defend your legacy. I will love you forever. She smiled, a radiant smile that filled him with peace, with hope, with acceptance. I know you will, my love, she said, and I will always be with you. As the sun began to rise, casting its golden rays through the trees, Kasha's form began to fade, her light dimming, her presence receding. Goodbye, Rorik, she whispered, her voice barely audible. My love, my wolf, my heart. And then she was gone. Rorik remained there, kneeling beneath the ancient oak tree, his heart broken, but his spirit unbroken. He had lost Kasha, the woman, but he had gained Kasha, the spirit, the guardian, the heart of Hollowfang. He stood up, his gaze fixed on the rising sun, his body bathed in its golden light. He felt her presence, everywhere in the wind, in the trees, in the earth, in his soul. He was not alone. He would never be alone. She was with him, always, forever. He raised his head and howled, a long, mournful howl that echoed through the forest, a cry of grief, of love, of acceptance. It was a howl that spoke of loss, but also of hope, of despair, but also of strength. It was a howl that announced to the world, to the hunters, to the darkness, that Hollowfang was not defeated, that its spirit was unbroken, that its heart still beat strong. The hunters, hearing his howl, knowing that their attempt to destroy the heart of Hollowfang, to weaken its protector, did not attack. The darkness did not approach. For, even though Rorik stood as one being, the power of Hollowfang, the strength of Kasha, resided within him. Epilogue. Years passed, and Rorik remained the steadfast guardian of Hollowfang, his life a testament to his love for Kasha, his commitment to her legacy, his unwavering protection of the forest and its inhabitants. He never forgot her, never stopped loving her, never ceased to feel her presence, in the wind, in the trees, in the stream, in the heart of Hollowfang. He spoke to her often, sharing his thoughts, his feelings, his experiences. He knew she heard him, that she was always with him, watching over him, guiding him, loving him. Silas, transformed by Kasha's sacrifice, by her love, by her forgiveness, became Rorik's loyal companion, his trusted friend, his brother in spirit. He dedicated his life to atoning for his past, to protecting Hollowfang, to honoring Kasha's memory. The werewolves of Hollowfang thrived, their numbers growing, their strength renewed, their bond with the land stronger than ever. They lived in peace, harmony, balance, guided by Rorik's wisdom, protected by Kasha's spirit, united by the love that had blossomed between a woman and a wolf. The hunters, scattered and defeated, eventually faded away, their hatred consumed by the power of Kasha's sacrifice, their dark intentions thwarted by the enduring strength of Hollowfang. Rorik, though he lived a long and full life, never took another mate. His heart belonged to Kasha, eternally, irrevocably. He knew that they would be reunited one day, in another realm, in another life, in another form. As he grew old, his body weakening, his senses fading, he felt Kasha's presence more strongly than ever. She was calling him home, welcoming him to the other side, to the place where their love would be unbound, unburdened, unbroken. One evening, as the sun was setting, casting its golden rays through the trees, Rourke walked to the ancient oak tree, the place where Kasha had made her sacrifice, the place where their love had been transformed. He sat beneath the gnarled branches, his old bones aching, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his heart filled with peace. He closed his eyes and felt her warmth, her love, her presence. "Kasha," he whispered, his voice weak but filled with love. "I'm coming home." He felt her embrace, her spirit surrounding him, lifting him, guiding him. He felt the pain, the weariness, the weight of his mortal life fading away. He opened his eyes and saw her, standing before him, radiant, beautiful, ethereal. She was not the woman he had known, but the spirit, the guardian, the heart of Hollowfang. "Rourke," she said, her voice a melodic whisper, filled with love and welcome. "My love, my wolf, my heart." He reached out, his hand meeting hers, their fingers intertwining, their souls reunited. They were together again, forever, bound by a love that transcended time, that defied death, that endured eternally. The sun dipped below the horizon, the forest grew silent, the wind whispered through the leaves, carrying their love, their story, their legacy, to the far corners of Hollowfang, to the world beyond, to the stars above. The ancient oak stood sentinel, a witness to their enduring love, a symbol of their sacrifice, a testament to the power of forgiveness, of hope, of the heart's true north. And as the moon rose, a single wolf howled, a howl of pure joy. The end.